Again, welcome to The Purpose of This Book with David G. and David G. Our second to last week in this 2 year long study. And tonight we are on page 158, third paragraph. David, you want to recap or set this up before I start?
Yeah, just real brief. Before David starts reading this paragraph, I set this thing up like he said. Basically, is we'll be talking about AA number three, which was Bill Dotson, who got sober in the town's hospital. And the thing about that is he Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson came and visited him in 3 short days. Pay attention to this, please. 3 short days, he worked the 6 steps of the Oxford group. Then he then this thing will be set up by what David's going to read next here. And Bill Dotson then carried the message. He never drank again. He had permanent sobriety for the rest of his life. And so the first three members of AA got sober and then stayed sober.
Okay, fantastic. So let's get going. New content, 158, paragraph 3. That afternoon, he put on his clothes and walked from the hospital a free man. He entered a political campaign, making speeches, frequenting men's gathering places of all sorts, often staying up all night. He lost the race by only a narrow margin, but he had found God, and in finding God, had found himself. Brad, anything? Nope.
Okay, so a really good start at the beginning of that sentence is that afternoon, which is day three, he put on his clothes before he walked out of the hospital. That is not probably something that he did before when he was drinking prior to that, right? I'm just guessing. Like he probably maybe walked around naked many times because of drinking. So he put on his clothes and he walked from the hospital. And I circled this word, free man, free from the obsession, free from the malady, free from self, from resentment, from fear, from self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, and this is what the results of working the steps in a rapid manner and getting to what the end of the paragraph is going to talk about is where we found God. And we know, as we read the book earlier on, that we found God deep down inside of every man, woman, and child. It was just covered up by pomp and circumstance, meaning that my ego and outside circumstances blocked me from that kind of stuff. But when he had a clear enough mind, he heard loud and clear Bill and Bob's message. What? Two things: problem solution. I must know both. And they delivered that to them. And he even made a statement, the last page, like you men really know your stuff. They do. And just so my job as a recovered alcoholic drug addict, when I forgot to introduce myself, my name is David. I'm a recovered alcoholic and drug addict. But my job is to be armed with the facts about myself, to invest myself in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, because this is the program. This is the program. The fellowship is a wonderful thing. It derives from this program, but just going to meetings is not going to suffice. It's not going to be enough for me. The grace of God may work well for a while there, but not for me. I got to have a relationship with power, and the steps are designed to do exactly that for me. So he's a very energetic man. Wanted to be a servant to other people in a political campaign. Went out, spent lots of times. He's probably an overachiever, maybe a workaholic to some extent, because he would stay up all night. And he lost the race by a narrow margin. But this is the great part that I also circle and I highlighted. But he found God. He
Yeah.
found God through the whole entire process, not just because he heard Bill and Bob at the hospital.
Oh,
Oh, I coughed. Sorry, I didn't want to be rude. Not because that, but he found God in all parts of his life. Like, so again, it's like God is not segmented in just my sobriety. He's a part of my relationship with my wife, my kids, my employer, my finances, sponsor. All these things in my life as I invite God in for all these things here in my life. And then by finding God, he found himself. And how did he find himself? And for me, I think it is in the fourth column of the fourth step. I think in the fourth column of the fourth step is the mirror. I finally could see what you guys have always seen about me, how selfish, how self-righteous and resentful and fearful I was. Now I can see myself. So I have these defects of character that I share with another human being, 5, and then I'm able to take those things to God in 6, and then he removes the ones that he sees fit to be done. And then in 7, that's when I really get free and I get to do that, the amen, because steps 3 through 7 are all connected.
mean, David did a really nice job there in a short paragraph, so I'll just sort of I'll underscore just a couple of things. You know, what this is illustrating is that once this guy started recovering and got recovered, he was able to make a life out of himself again, right? Now, you know, so entered a political campaign, making speeches, that's a big deal, right? Getting into politics, but how about making speeches? Isn't it still like so the number one fear that everybody has as humans is public speaking, right? So this guy, we're all riddled with fear before we get recovered. This guy so overcame it that he's up there making public speeches. That's a big deal. Frequenting, you know, hanging out at men's places of all sorts. I'm guessing that sort of clubs and things like they had back in the day. High energy, like David said, being social, being out and about, right? Lost the race by a narrow margin. So what? He got out there and he did it. He was capable of running, right? And he wasn't full of fear, which would have prevented him from doing something like that. And David talked about this, but he found God, and in God he found himself. And man, I couldn't agree more. You know, that 4 and 5, that final column, when I see, please don't say my part. It's not about me having a
Mm.
part. If I got a part, you got a part. What does the 4 step say? It says we put the other person aside entirely, right? This is about me. What are my mistakes and faults? You want to have a spiritual experience if you never had one? Do your 4 step thoroughly and honestly, and I guarantee you'll have a spiritual experience. And then in 4 and 5, it tells us it's a promise. I pray to God and I thank Him that I've gotten to know Him better, right? Which is exactly what this is saying right here, right? It's saying he's finding God, found himself, right? That's the coming together. That's the duality of man and spirit. And here's the other thing. It's just I'm sneaking into the next paragraph, but the first line in the next paragraph says he never drank again. I wonder why he never drank again. This was AA number 3. This was Bill and Bob went to this guy in the hospital 3 days in a row, worked 1, worked 2, worked 3. I bet he was writing his inventory as soon as he walked out of there that day. I bet he had his 4 step done and go back. We've been going to 129 so much in the last 6 months, even before we read 29. We were going forward to it and we've been going back to it. Let's go back to it one more time. What were they doing? Why was AA more effective back in the day than it is now? There's the instruction on the bottom of 129. This is in the family afterward. Though the family does not fully agree with dad's spiritual activities because they don't get it, they should let him have his head. That means they should let him do what he wants. Even if he displays a certain amount of neglect and irresponsibility toward the family, it is well to let him go as far as he likes in helping other alcoholics. Here's the key phrase. I mean, that's an important phrase, but here's the big one. During those first days of convalescence, this, helping other alcoholics, will do more to ensure sobriety than anything else. I guarantee within 24 to 48 hours of Bill Dotson leaving the hospital and starting to spend time with Bill and Bob, I guarantee they were talking to another drunk. I guarantee Bill Dotson was helping to carry the message. This is what they did. This is what we're trying to do now. And before we started the recording, this is what I mentioned, that when we start our new 12-step study Fridays at 3:30 Central, first week of June, that's why we're doing a workshop on how to take someone through the 12 steps in 12 weeks. And I know some people might say 12 weeks is too long. I get that. There's speakers we love, like Cameron F. I think he's got like 4 hours, get someone through it. God bless. But I'll say
Mhm.
that if you start sponsoring and consistently get your sponsees through the 12 steps in 12 weeks, you will be in the top 0.00001 percentile, right? Because most people who show up to an AA meeting, CA meeting, choose your A meeting, never even take all the steps, right? And God forbid you get stuck in one of these maniac groups that says you're going to work a step a year. That's how we kill people actively, right? Get going right away. There's some urgency here. We always give credit to Howard, although he didn't originate this. He just talks about it a lot. That window of opportunity can slam shut. We got to get people to God before it slams shut on these suffering alcoholics and addicts.
Can I jump
Please.
in? So I've been working with David for a long, long time now, and I didn't want to say this because I thought he might go there. So since he didn't, I'm going to go to his favorite page because I want to re-emphasize the importance of what it looks like to be a free man, and what does that exactly look like? And it looks like internally. So if we will go back to page 27, and when Carl Jung is working with Roland Hazard, he explains to him what having a vital spiritual experience looks like. The same way as Dr. Silkworth explains to us what an entire psychic change looks like, both meaning the same thing. But just in the middle paragraph in 27 in the fourth paragraph there, it talks about what happens. It says, to me, these occurrences are phenomenon. So this is something that this doctor could observe, but he could not explain. A phenomenon is that they appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements, rearrangements. And what were these changes? Ideas, emotions, and attitudes. These were once the guiding forces of our lives, and these men were suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptual motives began to dominate this. This must happen for me. This I must get, because if I could have produced that on my own power, wouldn't I have done that without coming in AA, or kind of like what Paul talked about earlier on? It's like I wasn't planning on staying here. I was going to get well quickly, and that's not exactly how it worked out for me. But these things all took place for me. My ideas, which are my feelings, my attitudes, which are my beliefs, or my ideas or my thinking, my emotions or my feelings, and my attitudes or my beliefs. Those things all need to change. But I have to stay in constant contact with the power grain myself for that to take place, because all I have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition.
So back at 158, paragraph 4. That was June 1935. He never drank again. He too has become a respected and useful member of his community. He has helped other men recover and is a power in the church from which he was long absent. Nothing, Brett?
Yeah, so let's mark a date there. So that date actually was June 26th, 1935. And he never drank again, meaning he had permanent recovery, permanent sobriety. Yes, we can. We can be recovered, past tense. He too became a respected, watch these words, and useful member of his community. So remember in the bedevilments when we're feeling useless, and what we come to find out is that actually that may be the key to life. Here he is in early convalescence. He's feeling useful. And if we would just go back to the 7th-step prayer on page 76 in the second paragraph, and they're going to use that word in here too. So second paragraph, 7th-step prayer. When ready, we say something like this: my creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. That's what I'm supposed to be, useful to God and to all my fellows. This is the experience that he got. This is the experience that I have. This is the experience that you get. The whole thing by being a recovered alcoholic. That's how this works. And this says, grant me strength. So that implies action. And as I go out from here to do God's bidding, I just added a word there, your bidding, and then the amen comes in. So also in that paragraph, then we go back to page 158 in the fourth paragraph. So he became respected and useful member of the community. He helped other men recover. As David's point, David brought up, he's working with people right away. That's what they did. They took these people right away. 1, 2, 3, upstairs you go, do 4, come on, share 5, hit your knees, let's do 6 and 7, and then we go out making our amends. And then it says he helped other men recover and is a power in his church. Notice the way that's written. He's helping other people to recover, and he's going to church. He's not going to church in place of Alcoholics Anonymous. He's going to church along with Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've seen a lot of people, and I've had friends that do that. And sometimes it's a grave mistake, meaning grave, meaning death, because they drink again. And I'm not saying anything about church, tabernacle, any of those things, mosque, all that stuff's great. But not in place of Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, not for me. Along with is a fine recipe for having a better and stronger relationship with God, and also being a better demonstration to the guys I get to work with. So, and then it says from which he had long abstinence. So he had stopped going to church, and something brought his heart and his soul and his feet back to the church again. And I relate to that.
I'm not sure I have anything to add. I think David knocked that one out of the park, so we'll just keep going. So you see, there were 3 alcoholics in that town. 3 alcoholics in that town, just letting that sink in, who now felt they had to give to others what they had found or be sunk. After several failures to find others, a fourth turned up. He came through an acquaintance who had heard the good news. He proved to be a devil-may-care young fellow whose parents could not make out whether he wanted to stop drinking or not. They were deeply religious people, much shocked by their son's refusal to have anything to do with the church. He suffered horribly from his sprees, but it seemed as if nothing could be done for him. He consented, however, to go to the hospital where he occupied the very room recently vacated by the lawyer.
I have The Devil May Care, reckless, lighthearted, cheerful.
Thank you. All right, let me hop in here, David.
Please.
So I just want everyone to sink in here, right? This is June 1935. There were 3 alcoholics in that town. Guess what? There were 3 AAs in the entire planet. I don't know what the population of the world was in 1935. It's about 8 billion people today. I don't know, 5 billion, something like that, 4 billion. Plenty of people, 10% of the population alcoholics. There was 3 people, and there was 400 million by the numbers needing help. Okay, put that in perspective. They felt they had to get to others would have been found, or what they had found or be sunk. They had to carry the message. What was the message? Well, it turned into this book because Bill started writing it, and 4 years later it was published. But what was the message that they knew? The message was they understood the powerlessness of alcoholism, as explained by Dr. Silkworth, who explained it to Bill, right? They understood the necessity of the spiritual experience of the spiritual awakening, right? That really came from Dr. Jung, who had communicated that to Roland, who brought it back to the Oxford group, who carried it to Evie, who carried it to Bill, right? And they understood a program of action was needed, which at the time, their program of action was really the Oxford group and their 6 steps, their 6 tenets. So they understood the problem, they understood the solution, and they understood they had a working program of action to get them from the problem to the solution. That's the message that they felt they had to carry because it had worked for them. And it goes on to say, so we're talking about Ernie G here, and David will give some history about Ernie. He had heard the good news. You know what gospel, the word gospel is? Basically, it means the good news. We talk about spreading the gospel, spreading the good news, right? And so he proved to be a devil may care. We know what that. I mean, thank you for the definition, Brad. But we know this is sort of an old-fashioned term. So everyone except for maybe you young people like Emily and RJ, this is an old-fashioned term that we know that means this. Like, I don't care. I don't give a flip, right? I just do whatever. Wild, rebel without a cause, right? Devil may care. Whose parents could not make out whether he wanted to stop drinking or not, because Ernie didn't know if he wanted to stop drinking or not. So how would the people around him who loved him know? This is what we're reading here. Textbook alcoholic, the likes of which that we've been reading in the 158 pages up to here. We're not learning anything new about Ernie, right? His family, deeply religious people, they're shocked that their son refused to have anything to do with the church. Why did he refuse to have anything to do with the church? Because he was spiritually ill. Listen, maybe he wasn't into church anyway. Maybe he wasn't into it later. We don't know to this point in his story, but all we know is everything in his head, his heart, and his gut was sick and twisted and sideways. So why on earth would he be interested in anything having to do with spirituality? It sounds nuts. I wasn't either. He suffered horribly from sprees, but it seems nothing could be done for him. Again, this is the exact same alcoholic as we learned about from Bill Wilson and the many other descriptions of the alcoholics in the book. However, right, agreed to go to the hospital where, sort of interesting coincidence, occupied the very room vacated by the lawyer. I think it'd be fun if that really happened. I don't know that it didn't. We know that there's some liberties in the book, and as one of our favorite speakers, Herb K, likes to say, never let the facts get in the way of a good story. The story is good and it carries the point that's most important, right? So what's going on here? We see an illustration that these guys realized, Bill and Bob, they must go out and carry this message. They understood, like I said, the problem, the solution, and the program of action. So they went out looking. They found this Ernie kid. Ernie, a young guy, didn't care, not convinced he wants to stop drinking, but he's like, all right, I'll go to the hospital, check it out, because maybe he's sort of willing to consider stop drinking at this point.
All right, so yeah, as David said, I'll give you a brief description of what Ernie looked like. So he's described as a wild, devil-may-care young fellow, which we just described, and Brett Graves is a great definition of. And he enlisted for 1 year in the Army when he was only 14. He could pass for 18. He did this. So after getting out of the Army, he went to Mexico where he worked for an oil company and then rode the range in Texas. He'd been married twice and had a son. And after returning to Akron, he had trouble holding a job because of his drinking. His parents were very religious and belonged to the same church as T. Henry and Clarence Williams of the Oxford Group. It was probably they were told Ernie's parents about. That's how Ernie found out about Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson. They urged Ernie to go see Dr. Bob, and eventually he did. He agreed to be taken to City Hospital, where he tapered off. It took several days, he wrote, for my head to clear and my nerves to settle. After about 6 days in the hospital, he was visited by Dr. Bob, Bill Wilson, and Bill Dotson, who explained their program to him, and he agreed to give it a try. And he worked and he wrote as long as I allowed it to do so. He only allowed it to do so for about a year, and then became self-confident and careless, and he went on a 7-month slip. Finally, after 7 months of drinking, he went back unshaven, unkept, ill-looking, bleary-eyed, and asked for help again. He wrote that he was never lectured about his 7-month failure. Ernie never really gelled, according to Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob didn't really care for Ernie at all. He didn't. Sue remembered that, and he didn't quite know what to do with him. He even got to where he wanted to get paid for speaking in meetings. So he had last thing, he had periodic relapses, which got worse and worse until the time he died. So I'm not going to add anything else to that paragraph.
Oh, okay. Moving on. Top of 159. He had 3 visitors, the 3 wise men. After a bit, he said, "The way you fellows put this spiritual stuff makes sense. I'm ready to do business." I guess the old folks were right after all. So one more was added to the fellowship. Anything, Brett? No? Okay. So these guys came to see him. After a bit, all of a sudden, so remember in the last paragraph, parents couldn't figure out whether he wanted to stop drinking or not. Now these guys come and talk to him, and he says, "All right, what you're saying makes sense. The spiritual stuff makes sense. I'm ready to do business. But remember," right? This is a very quick summary. We're not getting as many sort of blow by blow details as we got about Bill Dotson and some of the other stories in the book. Yeah, they told him about the spiritual program of action and the necessary vital spiritual experience. But I guarantee before they did that, they spent a whole lot of time, Bill and Bob, talking about their drinking, talking about the powerlessness, right? The physical craving, the mental obsession. Bill had learned his lesson from Dr. Silkworth. Remember, and this was the key that opened, the lockdown mind of Dr. Bob when Bill went to Bob and said, "Let me talk to you about my drinking." And Bob was like, "Man, this is the first guy I've ever talked to that knows anything about alcoholism." And this is how they unlocked Ernie as well. And the fact that he was willing to be open to this spiritual experience when his whole life it suggested he wanted nothing to do with church shows you how one alcoholic talking to another, they were able to break through to him.
Yeah, so David brought up a reference. He talked about 1935, how many people were on the planet. So I Googled it.
Oh.
Looks like there's 2.1 billion. That won't keep you sober, but if you want to know that, just for the heck of it, which is kind of fascinating if you think about it, because we have 8 billion today. But even prior to 1935 at 2.1 billion, in the year 1800, there was only 1 billion. So we grew by 1.1 billion in a century's time, century and a quarter. So yeah, so this kind of tells me this, that, when we look at Bill's story and he went to work with Dr. Bob, it kind of makes Bill think in my heart of hearts that he's a hero, but that's not really necessarily true, but it is kind of true at the same time. But what instead this book tells us is the story in the big book itself it tells us a story the whole time. It reminds us of something that it only takes one person to work with one other suffering alcoholic to make a difference. That is my obligation, to be armed with the facts about myself so that I can carry this message. To David's point before, just sitting in meetings and hoping that something rubs off on me, and then talking about, step 1, 2, 3 and doing that dance and going back out again. It's like, this getting overconfident like Ernie did, or just getting full of sloth or whatever the case is. Like, dude, I do more today in my sobriety than ever. Why? Because I think that's the leading of a power greater myself in my life, and all the great examples of people that I hang around with, all my running buddies that do a lot of stuff too. And I like the results. Earl Hightower says this. It's still about the buzz.
Yeah.
It's still about the buzz, right? Guess what? No consequences though. So that's my experience. Like, I love being sober, and I'll bet you my family loves it too.
Ah. All right, moving on. Paragraph 2 on 159. All this time, our friend of the hotel lobby incident, so that's Bill Wilson, right, remained in that town, Akron, Ohio. He was there 3 months. He now returned home, so back to New York City, leaving behind his first acquaintance, Dr. Bob, the lawyer, that's Bill Dotson, and the devil may care chap, that's Ernie G. These men had found something brand new in life. Though they knew they must help other alcoholics if they would remain sober, that motive became secondary. It was transcended by the happiness they found in giving themselves for others. They shared their homes, their slender resources, and gladly devoted their spare hours to fellow sufferers. I'm going to make sure everybody heard that last part. Gladly devoted their spare hours to fellow sufferers. They were willing by day or night to place a new man in the hospital and visit him afterward. They grew in numbers. They experienced a few distressing failures, but in those cases, they made an effort to bring the man's family into a spiritual way of living, thus relieving much worry and suffering. Brett, nothing? Okay.
So there's a lot chalked in this paragraph, and I'm going to try to be brief with the whole thing. So David gave all the good descriptions of the players in this play for us. So I'll skip through all that stuff. But it talks about here halfway through or a quarter way through the paragraph, though they knew they must help other alcoholics. So they knew their heart of hearts that they must work with other people. And if they would remain sober, that motive became secondary. Why? Because what transcended in them, what they had to go beyond, was by their happiness they found in giving themselves of others. And I have never ever worked with another alcoholic as I was taking them through the steps. Prior to going to their house or to the halfway house or to the 3/4 house or to the homeless shelter, I thought, I really don't want to freaking do this. Oh my God. It's just like, am I going to get bed bugs? I mean, I just don't want to go, I'm so self-absorbed and selfish. But man, when I leave and while I'm there, I'm not looking at the clock. I'm taking my time going through the work. This guy is picking up on the material. He's getting ready because I'm preparing him to work with other people right away. And then they talked about they share their homes, their slender resources, and they gladly devoted their spare times to fellow sufferers. They were willing by day or night to place a new man in the hospital and visit him afterwards. So what does that mean? That means I could pick up somebody and take them to a meeting. That's me taking someone to the meeting. That's not me taking someone to the book. There's a difference. Take them to a treatment center, take them to a hospital, me just dropping them off. Me revisiting them and approaching them again is taking them to the work. That's my responsibility to do. And these guys are talking, excuse me, these guys are talking about being inconvenienced, and I got to go. I got to go to page 97 and just go to 97 in the first paragraph here. This is Bill giving 12 conditions of what inconveniences look like. First paragraph, never avoid these responsibilities. Be sure you are doing the right thing if you assume them. Helping others is what? The foundation stone of recovery. The foundation stone of our recovery is the 12th step. A kindly act once in a while isn't enough. You have to, which is a must, to act the Good Samaritan every day. That is the first inconvenience, if need be. It may mean the loss of many nights' sleep, the second inconvenience. Great interference with your pleasures. Third inconvenience, interruption to your business. It may mean sharing your money. Fourth inconvenience, your home. Counseling frantic wives and relatives is the fifth. Innumerable trips to police courts. The sixth, sanitariums, hospitals, jails, and asylums. Your telephone may jangle at any time, day or night. Number seven, your wife may sometimes say she is neglected. Number eight, a drunk may smash your furniture in your home or burn your mattress. Number nine, you may have to fight with him if he is violent. Number 10. Number 11 is sometimes you will have to call a doctor and administer sedatives. No, you won't. Don't do that under his direction. And the 12th one is another time you may have to send for a police or an ambulance. Occasionally, you'll have to meet some of these conditions. Yes, I need to be inconvenienced. I'm not even close to being inconvenienced that much as these guys were, not even in the ballpark. Nobody's ripping the keys out of my piano, and no one's ever started a fire in my mattress. So I'm way ahead of the game. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I mean, if David didn't say this, he usually does, or I'll paraphrase. If I'm not being inconvenienced in recovery, I'm not doing it right. It's supposed to be a pain in the ass sometimes, but then that's where the spiritual growth comes from inconveniencing myself, because how am I being inconvenienced? I'm helping other people. And by the way, the more I help other people, the more I am of service. Guess which selfish alcoholic and drug addict gets the medicine he needs? Me, right? It's a beautiful paradox if it works in that way. And so, there's just a little bit of history as this paragraph carries along, saying, okay, we got these four guys, but they found something brand new in life. What'd they find? They each found unity. They found recovery, which was really a design for living, a way of life to forge them each a new relationship with God, and they had a shared spiritual group conscience, right? And then they discovered service, carrying the message. And David was talking about taking people, carting people to the hospital, taking them to meetings. That's carrying someone to the message. That's not carrying the message. More interested in you carrying the message than driving someone so that somebody else can be burdened to carry them the message. We are all shoulder to shoulder here. We are all equally accountable to carry the message. They knew they must help other alcoholics to remain sober, right? Became the second motive. And these guys found pleasure. So we talked about being inconvenienced, and David read those 12 inconveniences. That's a little bit of it's almost like a little bit of the stick. Like, hey, this is the burden of recovery. It's the burden of responsibility service. There's some of that. Well, what's the other side of the coin? Is that there's a lot of joy in seeing people pull their lives together and to get happy and healthy and all those other promises early in books. You see, the families, the households get restored. To see people be able to go run for office and make public speeches and all these things we're reading about. There's a lot of joy in that. It's a pleasure to see people get to God as they understand Him, right? And I reread this part about gladly devoting their spare hours to fellow sufferers. Again, just pounding on this inconvenience thing, and I'm guilty of this, guys. Anytime I sit up here, thundering down from Mount Pius, please understand that right in front of me, as I thunder down to you, there's a mirror right in front of me, and there's times that the phone is ringing, and I'm like, I do not want to talk to the sponsee. He's going to talk my ear off. I'm going to tell him the same thing I tell him every time, right? We're all guilty of this, right? I am highly imperfect in my program. But when I catch myself doing it a lot, then I got to do some work on that. I got to take it to my sponsor, or I got to talk to David or one of my other running buddies about it to get out there and remember I'm supposed to be inconvenienced, right? But for me too, doesn't matter, 21 years in, if I'm not inconvenienced, I too am not doing it right.
Yeah, I just want to be real clear that I don't ever, if any of my guys who are on there today, I never feel that way when I pick up the phone when you call me.
Right.
I never ever. I just want you guys to know that. I'm so excited that you called. I can't wait to talk to you. But hey, David made a really viable point, like a really strong point. He talked about recovery and unity. And early AA, they brought you to the recovery portion first, long before they brought you to the fellowship. They wanted to qualify you and make sure that you were willing to go to any lengths. So they brought you to the base of the triangle, then they brought you to the fellowship, and then they introduced you to service. And that's just the way that it worked. Anything wrong with that? Today, we just have fellowships everywhere, so we can do that. But man, they didn't have that opportunity. They had a meeting in New York and a meeting in Akron and then a meeting eventually in Cleveland. But man, they brought you to the base of the triangle first. Go, David.
Okay, so bottom of 159. This is a fast forward now, guys.
Hmm.
A year and 6 months later, these three had succeeded with 7 more. Seeing much of each other, scarce an evening passed that someone's home did not shelter a little gathering of men and women, happy in their release, and constantly thinking how they might present their discovery to some newcomer. In addition to these casual get togethers, it became customary to set apart one night a week for a meeting to be attended by anyone or everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. Aside from fellowship and sociability, the prime object was to provide a time and place where new people might bring their problems. Brett, nothing? Okay.
So maybe you're interested to find out who those 7 people were. So I'm going to tell you who they were actually.
Cool.
And if Rob already hadn't beat me to the punch, probably did. So Bill from New York, Bob from Akron, Bill D from Akron, another Ernie G from Akron. Then the 5th one would be Walter Bray, Bray. And then the next one is Phil Smith from Akron. And we don't want to leave Hank Parkhurst out because he was actually number 2 in New York. So he was number 2. And the other person, number 3, was Fitzmayo. So that's the first top 7. That's almost the whole batting order for their baseball team. They have 7 players in place, ready to knock the everything out of the park for these guys. So to the text that David read today, it says a year and 6 months later, these had succeeded with 7 more. So a year and a half later, we don't even today we have so many people in so many fellowships, and hopefully you're finding some strong medias that are literature based so that you can carry the message and hear the message, and seeing much of each other scarce and even past that someone's home did not shelter a little gathering of men and women. So these guys got together, even though at the bottom of the page it talks about they had a customary set apart one night a week for a meeting. One night a week. So what did they do the other nights of the week? Well, they tell us right there in that paragraph. They still got together. They gathered these men and women, and they also set up times to meet with the newcomer to go out for coffee or tea during the week so they can carry the message. So meetings are awesome, but meetings aren't what keeps me sober. Meetings were never intended to keep us sober. They were never intended for that. It was for gathering. The sole purpose of the group is the teaching and the practice of the 12 steps. Bill writes this in the Grapevine. And so that is what I am supposed to be doing, teaching the practice of the steps. I'm not there to try to help that poor old lady figure out what plumber she should get for that dishwasher that keeps making a whole lot of noise. If anyone else has been to a meeting like that, you know what I'm talking about. So flip over the page on page 160, the paragraph ends up on. It says, aside from fellowship and social ability, the prime object was to provide a time and place where new people might bring their problems. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I wanted to read that little bit above that, though. So go back to page. In addition to these casual get-togethers, it became customary to set apart one night a week for meetings to be attended by anyone and everyone interested in the spiritual way of life. You know, another great page for David is on page 25 in the 3rd paragraph. We have 2 alternatives. Bottom of the page 25, 3rd paragraph. If you're seriously alcoholic, as we were, huh?
He's stealing all my greatest hits.
Dude, you want to go? You go, bro. Go. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. No, I'm done. Go ahead. Go ahead. Thumbs up, bro. How are you?
All right. David was
I know
introducing me. Bottom of 25, right? This is my favorite paragraph in the book. Page 27, my favorite page, but page 25 is my favorite paragraph. You guys have been studying with us. You've heard me go back to these so many times, right? If you were as seriously alcoholic as we were, bottom paragraph of 25. What does it mean to be as seriously alcoholic as we were? It means powerless, physically and mentally, and also terribly, desperately, spiritually ill. If you're like me, if you're like us, we believe there's no middle of the road solution. No put the plug in the jug. No, don't drink and go to meetings. No, 90 meetings in 90 days will cure you. None of that stuff. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And if we'd passed into the region from which there's no return through human aid, we had but 2 alternatives: right fork, left fork. Two, no middle of the road. You can't split the difference, guys. One was to go on to the bitter end. That's like this, or putting the blinders on, right? One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness, the awareness of our intolerable situation as best we could, which is basically trudging on to death, and the other is to accept spiritual help, right? This is the place where people found themselves, right? This is the point where we hope that those newcomers are coming up to that one meeting a week to express that level of problems, that level of severity, that level of criticality in their spiritual malady and in their drinking. And David talked about this in his comment, and he says this just damn near about every week. They had a meeting. What was the point of the meeting? It was so that newcomers could show up, and then guess what would happen to those newcomers? They'd say, "You want to hear about our drinking? Great. Tell me about your problems? Fantastic. You ready to stop drinking for good and for all? Great. We're going to do 1, 2, 3. We're going to take you upstairs and start writing your inventory." And today, guys, the number one reason for any of us to go to meetings today is to do the same thing. It's to go find people to take through the steps. Other stuff is great too, right? We find those service opportunities and we see our friends and we hug them and sit in an uncomfortable chair and drink bad coffee. All that stuff is great too. But the number one reason to go to a meeting today is to go find new people to sponsor. And David and I have talked about this too, right? Because we go through times we go to a lot of in-person meetings and we're going to a lot of Zoom meetings. And he and I are both blessed. At times we do a lot of speaking on Zoom. And every time we do a lot of speaking, we got a lot of people to request to hey, take me to steps. Hey, will you sponsor me? And sometimes we got to even like take a little step back, right? Because neither one of us try to be so egocentric that we think we can sponsor 20, 30, 40. Some of these guys say how they do it. I have no idea how that's done. I got 3 guys at a time I can sponsor. And we got to help guys get through all the stuff in their lives. Now I can take 12 or 15 guys through the steps all at once. No problem. We'll gang them together. I'm doing it on Sunday mornings right now with my sponsees. It's cool. And we're doing it 12 steps in 12 weeks and get anybody through the steps fast. Sponsoring is a whole other thing, right? Here's the other thing about this. Every night, scarce an evening passed at someone's home did not shelter a little gathering of men and women, happy in their release. Release from what? Release from powerlessness to alcoholism, yes. But how about release from the bondage of self, right? How about release from the illness, the spiritual cancer, right? The sickness in the head, the heart, and the gut, constantly thinking how they might present their discovery to some newcomer. Anybody know how frequent constantly is? All the time. They were consumed. They were obsessed with constantly talking to figure out how they could better carry the message, right? So then they had this meeting set apart one night a week. Anyone or everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. And by the way, aside from fellowship and sociability of the meeting, like I mentioned, those are other reasons to come to that meeting. Prime object was to provide a time and a place where new people might bring their problems so that we can get them on the hook and reel them in and get them to God. And I'll speak about AA for a second here because I'm going to refer to another piece of AA literature. Meetings to be attended by anyone or everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. So in the AA group pamphlet, right, is very important. It talks about there's only 2 types of meeting. There's an open meeting and a closed meeting. Now, format, we got different things. Big book meeting, 12 and 12, step, discussion, all these things. 2 kinds of meetings always, an open or closed. And this is really important. You'll see where I'm going with this. This is the section I'm going to read. The difference between open and closed AA meetings. The purpose of all AA group meetings, as the preamble states, is for AA members to, quote, share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism, end quote. For this end, AA groups have both open and closed meetings. Closed meetings are for AA members only, or for those who have a drinking problem and, quote, have a desire to stop drinking. That's the third tradition. You don't have to be a member. You can just show up and be like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I don't want to drink anymore. And guess what? You're automatically welcome, right? Open meetings are available to anyone interested in Alcoholics Anonymous's program of recovery from alcoholism. Key phrase coming up here, though, guys. non-alcoholics may attend open meetings as observers. Observers. What does an observer do? They observe, they watch, they listen. They do not participate. Right? This is AA literature, just like this is AA literature. I got into a very interesting philosophical conversation about this with ChatGPT the other day. I was talking to it as I was driving to Indianapolis. I said to ChatGPT, can we talk about this? And it read this to me, and I said, what do you think observers meant? And I said, what do you think? Is it in violation of the traditions? Is it disunifying if groups and meetings allow it? Non-alcoholics to talking meetings. Now, I'm not saying artificial intelligence knows better than us and our collective wisdom, but it was just an interesting conversation. And this personality said to me, basically, I'm not saying they shouldn't, but this is what it heavily suggests, right? All are welcome. Open meetings is where we showcase our effective solution that works. We want doctors and nurses and other people in the professional community and the spiritual community, reverends and priests and rabbis and imams and all these people to come and see how we can help people, right? But they can come and observe, right? Not to participate. I'll get done.
And let me just add too to the fact, so they try to find a bunch of alcoholics, and they weren't successful finding them all the time or even getting them sober, but they had success with the first 7. But again, I want to just emphasize and reemphasize the importance of this and why the success rate was so strong, because the group that they had, the drunk squad or whatever you wanted to call it back in the day, they took that prospect to the base of the triangle to recovery, then to the unity of the fellowship. That's why people stayed sober. No wonder they had such a good success rate. I'm just saying, a lot of times you just drop them off in the meeting, like, best of luck. Because Dr. Bob worked with what, 40,000 alcoholics? Just like David said, we can't sponsor everybody, but we can be spiritual guides. We can take them to the work quickly, pat them on their little rumps, say, dude, go carry the message. Right? Right on. Why can't we do that? Sure we can. I mean, I sponsor a lot of people. Most of my guys have been sober 20 plus years. But they all sponsor people, and they sponsor people, and they sponsor people. But I've done a spiritual guide to a lot of people, just like David did. And we've done it on conferences and conventions and done all this stuff. And I enjoy doing it. I absolutely love the success rate. And I haven't got any of them sober. I know David hasn't got any of them sober. Didn't get me sober, didn't get him sober. But man, he got him a relationship with God. And dude, their lives don't look nothing like they did, just like mine didn't look like anything like they did when I first came in. My life looks 180 degrees better and different. Go ahead, David.
Next week, time permitting, maybe we'll talk about the power of working with 3 alcoholics over the course of your recovery.
Okay.
Okay, 160. First full paragraph. Outsiders became interested. One man and his wife placed their large home at the disposal of this strangely assorted crowd. This couple has since become so fascinated that they have dedicated their home to the work. Many a distracted wife has visited this house to find loving and understanding companionship among women who knew her problem, to hear from the lips of their husbands what had happened to them, to be advised how her own wayward mate might be hospitalized and approached when next he stumbled. No? Okay.
Okay.
David.
So correct me if I'm wrong, though. Don't we have 2 more weeks? We still have the 23rd and the 30th.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think
I'm
we
just
got
saying.
next week. We're looking where we're at.
Okay. We'll see how we do. Okay. So outsiders became interested. And I love this. Think about this. One man and his wife placed their large home in disposal of this strangely assorted crowd. Yeah. We come from all different kind of walks of life. Not all of us smell good or even dress that well. This couple has since become so fascinated that they had dedicated their home to the work. What do churches do for us today? Churches do the exact same thing for us. They open up their doors as long as we are self-supporting, and we need to be. That's our 7th tradition. They did the same thing for us. And that's where we have a large amount of our meetings at today. And so these people were a great demonstration, probably to the fellowship in itself, to start going out and trying to find places that we can gather as a fellowship. So then it talks about many his attractive wife has visited this house, finding what? Loving and understanding companionship. That's what we're supposed to be doing in the fellowship. No cross talking, no fault finding, no arguing. Save that for the district and the area meeting, guys. Do that for service. Don't do that at a meeting. Do that after the meeting, at your business meeting. That's usually what happens then. And then they hear women who knew their problem, so they're relating, identification, to hear from the lips of their husbands what had happened to them, to be advised how her own wayward mate might be hospitalized and approached when next he stumbled. So if he drinks again, can she get free too? Yeah, that's what Ellenite's for. I can be free whether or not she drinks or doesn't drink, right? I can be free. And remember, the alcoholic is the disease to the Al-Anon member, right? So I've got to, if I'm really working a strong Al-Anon program, and I don't have a lot of experience with this, so I really shouldn't speak to it, but I'm just saying, I can find freedom even if I stay or if I go through prayer, meditation, and counsel. I can figure out what the right thing to do is. Good either.
Okay. Yeah, let's squeeze one more paragraph.
Okay.
Many a man, yet dazed from his hospital experience, has stepped over the threshold of that home into freedom. Many an alcoholic who entered there came away with an answer. He succumbed to that gay crowd inside who laughed at their own misfortunes and understood his. Impressed by those who visited him at the hospital, he capitulated entirely when later, in an upper room of this house, he heard the story of some man whose experience closely tallied with his own. The expression on the faces of the women, that indefinable something in the eyes of the men, the stimulating and electric atmosphere of the place conspired to let him know that here was haven at last.
I have this one I found interesting. Threshold. It connects one plane to another.
Oh.
Succumbed means yield, give into. Capitulated, surrendered. And haven, a safe place.
Those are all good ones.
Great.
So let me hop in here. So many a man dazed from his hospital experience, so they're coming out, right? They're getting over the DTs. God knows whatever else was going on to get him detoxed. Stepped over the threshold, and so I love that. Brett gave us sort of a figurative definition of threshold, and we know there's a literal one too, right? Which is a little strip underneath the door that you step across, right? So stepped over the threshold into that home, and it's like passing through that figurative arc that Bill talks about, right? With the third step, the keystone at the top, right? Into freedom. We pass through the arch into freedom, and these dazed alcoholics were stepping over the threshold into the same freedom in this home where they were finding recovery and unity and service, right? So many an alcoholic who entered there came with an answer. It says many, doesn't say all, right? And I appreciate that. Some people weren't ready to hear the message. I can talk all day long. I can take you through the book. I can take you through the steps. If you're not ready and you're not willing and you haven't hit rock bottom, I don't know. Sometimes it's just not heard. Succumbed to that gay crowd inside who laughed at their own misfortunes and understood his. I was talking about this last week. I love when a newcomer comes and tells some terrible, not tragic, like someone close to them dies, but like a tragically awful story that somebody does. They, like I say, they're drunk driving and they ran into like a parked school bus or something. And they're like, everybody in the meeting laughs out loud at that because it's the most ridiculous thing they ever heard. But we're not laughing at the alcoholic. We're laughing at, oh, I did that too. I too broadsided a school bus, or oh my God, I almost did that, right? We get these absurd stories. So, we learn swiftly to laugh at ourselves. We have to. It's very therapeutic to be able to get beyond this stuff because I can't sit in all this self-flagellation and beating myself up for all the stuff I did in the past. I got to be able to move on from it. And some of that is being able to go back and laugh at this. Impressed by those who visited the hospital, he capitulated entirely, surrendered entirely, right? When what? When he heard a story, you heard stories. That's what, when I started coming to meetings, and yeah, I heard people talking about how they drank and how they drugged, and that was meaningful to me. But what was so meaningful to me more than anything was when I started hearing about how other people had the same spiritual malady that I did. that they had those crazy thoughts, that they had the shitty committee. They would have arguments with themselves, and it was always one against many. There was all those voices in my head that were ganging up on me. That's when I knew I was in the right place, because it never occurred to me before that anybody else suffered like this. I thought that was unique to me, right? So these guys, just like I did, had this experience. Oh, you too, right? And then the family, right? The family who comes and says, oh, your husband, your wife, your son, your daughter, your parents, your friends, they got better too. Mine can get better as well. Well, thank God. And it's not just the stories, right? But it's the energy, the electric atmosphere. Again, the energy produced by that group spirituality, that shared spiritual conscience, right? That is what becomes so effervescent and available and enticing to people.
Yeah, so I'm going to take this in a whole different direction. So I was at a treatment center on Friday last week, and up on the whiteboard was watch for those triggers. Okay, so which is so ridiculous. Okay, triggers. But think about what this whole paragraph here is the direct opposite of what Bill or Fred described with that gay bar with the laughter that they had to make a decision on. Now, Fred's decision was to cross the threshold. So is the threshold the trigger? Okay, so don't cross any thresholds. That might be a trigger. You might drink. Not in this situation here. Step over the threshold of their home into freedom. So these are direct opposite from what Bill described earlier in the book about misfortunes, who laughed at their misfortunes. He's come to the gay crowd inside. This is so he had to make a decision when he's in the Mayflower Hotel. Like he's being drawn towards the bar, that gay crowd, all the laughter is going on in there. Maybe he could have a ginger ale. Lie. Fred went in there and had a highball, and he went on for quite a while before he got sober. But so, and then also in this paragraph, it talks about he heard the story of some men who experienced closely tallied with his own. What am I looking for? Looking for similarities in meetings, not differences. Not the guy who was divorced 7 times, not the guy that went to prison 15 times. I mean, unless I did, I'm looking for similarities. Did I drink, think, or feel? Did I drink, think, or feel? That's what I want to look for, because I'm looking for identification, see if I even belong here. But my job as a sponsor, as a recovered alcoholic, is to qualify them and let them know that they belong here if they are the real alcoholic. So I'll leave it at that because we're at the top of the hour.
Okay. Let me kill the recording.